It is 8:01. So over you to kick things off.
Let's go there. And we'll just wait for the screen to load for those of you who are here with us live. If you're not and you're with us in podcast version, then you'll be welcome to find these within our show notes as well. So this morning I thought we'd start with a little 2+2 in a kind of way. And it dawned on me earlier this week that one of the reasons I really appreciate where we live, and for most of us here, we're joining in Canada, and there's always a very, very high contingent from Alberta and then from Calgary, although we do know last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, we had somebody from Nigeria. So we are a little bit global, but you don't have to go very far to find a simply delightful view where we live. And we also know that we are currently held in an age of busy, an age of overload, and an age of distraction. The value of our pause has never been more important. And whether that is a pause to find the quiet in between the noise in your head and the noise in your world, or whether it's a pause just to check your energy or your mood before you enter into your next conversation, or given our topic today, respond to that email, or whether it's a pause simply to filter what you're going to say in your next sentence. I'd like to add to those pauses. And I think because a lot of the time, wherever we are, that view will be great, that it's worth recognizing our land is pristine, our land is beautiful, and include in that pause just a moment to recognize and acknowledge, as we do, that we are situated here in Calgary on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy. That includes our Indigenous people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, and they are the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nations. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for making your pause on a Friday to hang out with us and learn in this room today.
Perfect. Absolutely. And thank you, Jenny, for once again kicking things off so well. We are joined this morning by Tamara Shepherd. Tamara is one of our fantastic facilitators here at SAIT, amongst many other things that she does. Tamara is a returning guest with us. Probably the time before that you joined us, Tamara, might have been one of our best attended and most engaging sessions. And I always chuckle with Jenny when we come to this topic because we tend to spend a bit more time perhaps on the, let's call it the softer side of leadership, all the things you can't necessarily tangibly touch. But business writing is something we do every single day. And, it's such an important piece. And I think that's why it drives such engagement. And as we were talking about kicking things off this morning, I know you were eager to really just pose a question to folks to get the chat going. And with that, folks, please do follow along, throw your comments in the chat. If you have a specific question for us, please try and put it into the Q&A section versus the chat section. So, Tamara, over to you to pose your question or questions to the audience this morning.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Craig and Jenny. Thanks for hosting me again. I'm so pleased to be here to talk about a subject that's really near and dear to my heart, business writing, and how we can improve sort of our human connection with one another through our written work. We all know that it's not going anywhere, that this is one of the most prolific ways that we are communicating now, and it's just ramping up. We have way more options, more choices in terms of writing for work. So how do we actually become better at this? And Jenny, I loved your land recognition moment this morning and just reminding us every once in a while to take a pause. And we all know that in this world of busyness and sort of rapid fire communication, that's becoming more and more challenging. So my question to everyone this morning is, do you feel like your attention spans are diminishing, shrinking, getting shorter? Let me know if you feel like there's something going on there in terms of the way you're wired. 100% I see. Lots of thumbs up and yeses, absolutely. I totally agree with you there.
I like the no because I'm on
Somebody said
social
no because they're
media.
not on social media. Too much
I'm-
mindless scrolling.
Yeah, there you go. My partner and I listened to a podcast yesterday saying our attention span is 47 seconds. I'm going to argue that that might be combined. If I were
Yeah.
to take that,
we
right?
might make 47 in here actually.
Exactly. So that's fantastic. So Tamara and Jenny, I guess,
Yeah, I
what is
think
that?
we all have that familiar feeling, right? Where we feel like something's going on and our brains are almost turning to mush. We can't focus, we can't concentrate. We lose attention really quickly. So now my question to everyone is why? Why do you think that this is happening? What's on in the world that is
Yeah,
And
social media is showing up there big time. I know that certainly is an impact for me.
and the social media is endless too. I think unless you're, and we see it a couple of times in the chat there, unless you're really on top of it and I know, remove it from your phone, stop the notifications, take all those steps to help you, then it is there and it is constant.
Yeah, I think something else that I would add in here right now is I'm sitting here looking at 3 different screens. I've got you on one. I've got another screen with notes. I've got the other screens here with the chat and the recording going. I've got the slides. You know, if you forget to shut off your notifications for all your emails and Teams messages or Slack messages popping up, it's constant. It's coming everywhere all the time. That's certainly, I think, yes, we do more faster than ever before. And the question is, do we actually do more? And do we do it better?
right?
Right?
Yeah, there's that productivity question in there, right? We have access to all sorts of hacks and tools and tricks and techniques. And yet, are we becoming more productive? I'm not sure if that's the case in my world. I like some of the comments that I'm seeing come up through our chat here too. I am also wearing one of those watches that notifies me and tings and bings at me constantly. Too much content, fast pace. It's the world we live in. It's the information, access to information. This is causing our attention spans to be almost splintered, right? We have too many things to focus on at one time. And we all know that multitasking is a myth, it's a lie, that it increases our stress level, that it reduces the quality.
Yeah. So
it
it
actually takes
poses,
time
yeah. So sorry, Tamara.
to accomplish any.
Oh, we're having a
We
little
try.
technical. Yeah. We're having a scene. There you go. Speaking of technology, we're having a little technology glitch here, which interferes with communication. And I guess the question it poses for me then, Tamara, is if we have to try and cut through all this clutter, right? We are, for the most part, a lot of us are working via screens, via communication tools, whether it's, as I mentioned them all before, email, Slack, text, etc. How do we start writing better or writing to match the time that we are in? Right. So maybe that's, we could kind of go down that path now to talk about, okay, we know we've got an issue here. We know we have a deficit in the attention economy, perhaps.
Yeah.
How do we address
Yeah,
that through
we have to play the game. It's a new field based on what's happening in the world with technology. And so when we're on a new field, there's a new game, there's new players. So we have to have some new rules in terms to, in order to play the game and to compete effectively. So you may have all heard, as I have, there's an anecdote or a myth about the goldfish, right? The average attention span of the professional or the worker adults today has reportedly diminished from the year around 2000, where it was about 12 seconds. And when the study was done in 2015, our attention spans had purportedly decreased to that of about 8.5 seconds. And we all know the adage where it says a goldfish has a longer attention span than the average adult. So goldfish has an average attention span of about 9 to 10 seconds, and we're hovering around 8.5. Now, it feels true, doesn't it? Right? We're all just so distracted, but it's not actually true. That anecdote is based on one study that was done many years ago by a very famous company that we all know about. Turns out that Microsoft did a study about attention spans, and just as a quip in the introduction to this study, referenced the goldfish. So that's where it came from. So that illustrious goldfish has kind of dominated the scene in terms of attention spans, but it really has nothing to do with our attention spans. And the scientific study was not necessarily a scientific study about psychology and increasing the science towards biology. It was all about consumerism, right? How can we at Microsoft increase the odds of keeping people's attention or eyes on the page? So that's where it all came from. It's a consumer study for marketing and advertising. Yeah, really fascinating stuff. And that study has been referenced so many times, but is a singular study done for Microsoft for consumers. So what was the point of it? How can we earn more ad revenue? That's the whole point. And when we're talking about ad revenue, we have to introduce the attention economy. So in the attention economy, your eyes are the capital, right? And it is a limited resource. So it becomes a highly competitive market to capture your eyes, not only to capture them, but to retain them so that you're focusing on what they're trying to sell you.
Mm-hmm.
And you may be relieved to learn, as I was, that our brains are not actually being turned to mush, that we're not permanently damaged, right? That those neural pathways aren't being rewired so that our attention spans are dramatically diminished to that of less than a goldfish, 8.5 seconds. That's a joke, that's a myth. Let's debunk that right now. What is actually happening is we are becoming trained to make decisions on the content that we want to consume more quickly, right? So every time we get fed a shiny bite of information, we either come in and bite it and get hooked, or we spit it out and say, not for me. So we're being trained to quickly decipher or filter out what's of interest to us. And we can do that within a couple of seconds, milliseconds now, I would say. Scroll, scroll, swipe, swipe. So the attention economy is all about keeping your eyes on the page. So even though we feel like our brains are changing and our attention spans are getting worse, we're just, content providers are just becoming better and better at hijacking our attention. And quote unquote, they say that we are hijacking your attention because attention is currency in the attention economy. Does that make sense?
It makes too much sense.
Yeah. For me, it was just this big aha moment. Okay. And a relief. Okay. We are not actually being changed, altered. We get a choice still, right? We still have power over this, but we are in the attention economy and we are competing and we have to get work done and we have to get people to respond to our messages. And it's a very busy playing field and it's becoming busier and busier, as you all are aware.
Yeah. So you triggered a couple questions for me, Tamara.
Yeah.
As you're going through that. And I don't know if it's as simple as saying, if we are trying to communicate to others through our emails, through our memos, I don't know, does anybody write memos anymore, or is everything just an email? All right. And good grief, if I have to open the attachment as opposed to just reading it in the email, like that's another comment. But, you know, are we suggesting that we have to figure out how to hijack other people's attention?
Absolutely. I'm not
Okay.
even suggesting that. I'm blatantly stating that.
Right.
Right.
So in
If
other
we
words,
want to
how do
compete
we,
on this field, how do we do that? Right.
yeah,
Uh,
how do we feed them the shiny bits we want them to eat?
exactly. If attention is currency and companies are competing to separate you from that capital, we have to do the same. And we're competing against multi-billion dollar, $100 billion, $1 trillion companies that have very savvy techniques on how to do this. So let's learn from them. Let's pick this up. They do it by using what's called persuasive technology, right? And persuasive technology is something that we're all familiar with. We're just not really, it's there in the background, kind of lurking to capture our attention. And persuasive technology could be the alluring frequency of that ping in your phone, right? It's push notifications, it's likes, it's tags, tagging your name or hashtags. It's those little red dots on the apps that you're looking at that are telling you, attend to me, right? You have 22 messages. It's the flash, right? It's those sound bites. And that brings me to TikTok. ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, right, is a social media company.
Mhm.
I think we've just frozen there for a second, but we can pick up on a couple of things whilst we get Tamara back.
Feels-
I didn't know that TikTok's parent company wasn't a social media company.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, for me, it's interesting. She touched
Yes.
on a couple of things now. When you take a look at emails with Outlook, we're getting if you at somebody in the body of the email, it's flagged in that subject line. Now, that's no trick, right? That's exactly one of the shiny objects. I think for me too, Jenny, is, when I think about this, this really comes down to when you're trying to communicate en masse or via written word, how are you building? We've talked about this before. How are you building that trust? You need that trust. You need the reason for people to start engaging with your messaging. Everybody always reads something that comes from the president. Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't, right? Maybe there's some folks who just say, yeah, forget it, right? But how are you hooking them in to get that piece? And we could talk about subject lines. We could talk about all those other pieces. And Tamara, I see you're back now. But I'm just trying to think of trying to get to some of the tactical and practical here that we can share with folks too, who are sitting here looking at us today saying,
yeah,
I got a message I got to send out to my team or to my coworkers. They really need to read this. It's important. How do I do that without other than just using the little red exclamation point, which it seems 10 out of 10 emails are now red exclamation points. So
that's fair. All right, I'm sorry about the glitchiness here. I'm not sure what's happening. You guys are frozen. I'm assuming I'm frozen too. So I left off talking about persuasive technology, and yeah, you're right, Sylvia. The connection does seem to be bad here. I do have all my bars. I'm not sure what's going on, but persuasive technology is what we can learn from when we're talking about writing in the age of TikTok. So let's take a cue from what they're doing. They're sending out bytes. We need to send out bytes too. And we definitely have to keep eyes on the page. So when you're doing that, of course, there's 3 things that people see when you send a message. And those 3 things that people can see on their very small screens, many of us are looking at our emails and our messages on our mobile devices now. There's 3 things that you can see in your inbox.
yep, we got you.
You can just, yeah, if you can let me know that you can hear me,
I'm
that would
waiting.
be
I'm
great.
excited.
So
I want
those
the
3 things.
What are
Yeah.
the 3 you got our attention?
Number one is your name. When I see Jenny's name or Craig's name come up, I already have a relationship with you. I already know your reputation of sending messages that I'm interested in, that pertain to me, that add value to my life. So build up your reputation of being that person who is intriguing, who writes in a way that captures my interest and adds value to my life. So your name carries a lot of weight. That rapport building is really important. So it's the human connection. And oftentimes we are missing that, right? Human to human connection. We really need that. The second thing, and the most important thing, I think, is your subject line. What is your subject line saying? That's the headline. That's the flashy lure that's at the end of your hook. So make it tasty, make it shiny, right? Make it appealing to your readers. And I know this may sound crazy, but make it visually interesting. Make it visually interesting. I promise you that if you add a question or even an emoji to your subject line, it is more likely to be opened. So adding intrigue, creating curiosity, stating, of course, what the topic is, but can you frame this in a way that gets me to bite? Yes, you can add emojis to your business writing. We're often told not to use emojis. And a few years ago, I swear, a few years ago, I would have been on team no emojis because I read an article that said, if you send a smiley face in your business communications, you're going to be viewed as less competent at your job. And I've had to completely backpedal on that because, again, the game has changed. Highly visual. We are extremely visual in the way that we're consuming information. We like short content form, and emojis make your subject line stand out in very crowded inboxes. And I am not saying that lightly. We're talking crowded inboxes, right? So if you want to stand out, you have to do something different. This is one way that you can add visual interest to your subject line. And yeah, a lot of people are going to say they do look unprofessional. And here's the kicker. My rule of thumb when I'm using emojis is to be the second to use it, right? So I'm going to wait. And if you pop a little smile in to add personality and tone of voice to your message, I feel like I've got permission now to add the same. But let's start paying attention. What is it about certain emails that intrigue you? Do you notice that when you get a little rocket, does it catch your attention? When you're invited to a meeting, is there something there that's catching your attention? If it's working for you, it's going to work for others. So pay attention, learn from that.
Exactly.
Okay. And the other thing that the third thing, most important to catch people's attention, is the first few words of your message. Because before I open it in my inbox, I see that pre-header space. And that pre-header space is the most valuable real estate on the page. And if you've been in any of my classes, you know that I try and hammer this home. Make those first few words count. Check your mobile device, check your inbox. What do you see? You see the first 1 to 3 lines. You can set your mail up so that you can see that. And don't waste that space with things that are not adding value or not intriguing or hooking your readers. So paying very careful attention to that. It's a crowded inbox, right? I asked ChatGPT 4.0 yesterday, how many messages are being sent daily around the world? And ChatGPT 4.0, of course, instantaneously responded with, that's a really troubling question. It's almost impossible to calculate, but suggests over 300 billion emails are sent every day. Over 100 billion WhatsApp messages are sent every day. And then if we add to that everything else, our SMS, our Teams messages, our instant messaging, our Facebook Messenger, everything else that we're using, Slack, we're talking in the trillions every day. Now think about that. There's like 7+ billion people in the world. We're creating and consuming that much content. It's bonkers, right? So the game, the field, the players are changing. We need to keep up. We need to shift gears and keep up. So we need to hook. We need to use that persuasive technology in order to capture our readers' interest and get them not only to come in and take a bite and get hooked, but to stay there for a few minutes so that they can actually read and digest the information that you are trying to send. So the next part of our messages have to add value to people's lives. They need to be snappy. They need to be short. They need to be visually appealing. The content has to be value-based and add interest to your readers' lives, right? So hook them in, take a quick look, short and snappy. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, there's so much good stuff in here. Like those three things, we could talk for days, like literally a day on each one. But I heard somebody say at some point, your subject line is your shop window. And like, as you said, like in our email boxes, we've got hundreds daily. I know the three of us are receiving easily over 100 a day. And how do you stand out? So you might use an emoji. I don't know that I've ever used an emoji in a subject line, but you know, Tamara, just for people listening, when we say short, when we say snappy, when we say it's a hook, is it a question? Is there some kind of formula to think of? Like, I know you send me, okay, a third quarter update. I'm asleep and I'm not opening your email.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any kind of magic when we say persuasive technology? It's pretty scary to some. They're like, well, I don't have that creative brain. How can I be persuasive in an instance to stand out? What are some short sort of solutions that we could consider?
This is where our storytelling hats need to come on, right? We need to have the emotional appeal and that human connection again. So what do we love about a good story, right? The building of the up to the climax. So it's actually fun to try and come up with subject lines. So instead of third quarter analysis, the numbers don't lie, right? Something that's going to capture my interest, right? Or, you know, check out what's happening this quarter. So something that's going to intrigue your audience. It feels like a little bit of game playing, but we're going back to storytelling too. Stories work with humans, right? And that's who we're communicating with. That's whose attention we're vying for.
There's that one liner, isn't there? Facts tell, stories sell, which comes back to your point. We're selling. We're trying to capture.
Yeah.
We're selling.
So if you'd had a bad quarter, you could send, I wish this email wasn't true.
Yes. Brace yourselves, right?
Yeah, there's that too.
Sylvia, I like that you put in here. I still prefer the good morning, Sylvia, or Sylvia instead of hey, Sylvia. I love that you said that because we teach people how to communicate with us as well. So I am going to, if I am a savvy communicator, if I'm a savvy business writer, the next thing that I'm going to do is really analyze my audience. Do you think that marketers are analyzing their audience? 100% they are. They're putting on their Sherlock Holmes caps and they're grabbing their magnifying glasses and they're trying to figure out who you are and how you operate. And I'm going to do the same. When I'm communicating with you, I'm going to tweak my message based on the way that you're teaching me, you prefer to be communicated with. So if you're giving me a hey Tamara, you know how I'm going to respond to you? Hey Jenny. I'm going to play that game. So we're building rapport, and that's part of, can we do that in writing? Absolutely. It's part of the audience analysis. So
let me double click on that one for a second, though. I'll play devil's advocate here, because we just talked about how important the first line following the subject is.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we
does that show up? Yes.
If we like, if we're trying, yeah, it's going to show up. So what I'm trying to say is, do you want that to, right? If you're using that first line to also be your hook, do you want it to be good morning?
Yeah. So typically when you start a conversation, of course, you're going to have a greeting. So I do not omit the greeting on the first email in the thread.
Okay.
All right. So the first email in the thread is where we start the conversation. If the conversation is continuing, the next few emails, I may opt to leave that out entirely. Again, it's an audience analysis thing. Who am I dealing with? What era, what generation, what style, what tone, what formality are they familiar with? I'm going to play to them. But for the next few messages, I start to wean off that good mornings and the hellos and the highs and the hays, because again, it is eating up that valuable pre-header space, right? We're just now bantering back and forth. almost like our emails are becoming text messages. They're becoming shorter and shorter.
And that's curious too, when you say analyze your audience, I think for leaders who have joined us, which is a large group, there's an easy shortcut here too, and that's to ask your people. Like, have a conversation about what our team communication looks like, because we have so much team only communication that we could take a number of shortcuts within there that sort of cut down the tension, as in my own, oh gosh, have I got this right kind of thing. If I know full well that Craig doesn't expect a good morning on the 5th email of the morning, then fair enough, that's easier.
Yeah. Fantastic having conversations not only about the style and tone of your emails, but which is your method of communicating too, because we have options, right? We're not necessarily on average.
So I think we've just
every day. That's on average.
I'm going to say, no, I'd like TikToks, please, in future. That's how I'd like my communication.
Yes.
If you could send me all your notes by TikTok dance themes, Jenny, that would be brilliant.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we do have to play the game a little bit. And I remember somebody actually coming into my, I would send emails and it'd be crickets. I wouldn't get any response. And I was wondering what I was doing wrong. And then finally one day I was in the classroom on campus at SAID and I got a knock on the door, and this person popped their head into my classroom and said, "Hey, Tamara, I know that you're sending me emails, but I don't really check my emails that often. My preferred style of communication is texting. If you want to get to me, fire me off a quick text, and that I always have that with me and I'll respond right away." And I thought that was absolutely fantastic. I didn't say, well, my preferred method of communication is email, so you should respond to my emails. I adapt to their style, right? What works for them. And that was a valuable tidbit of information. So I'm paying attention. I'm adapting to my audience all the time.
So there's an interesting piece in here, though, because when we think of our teams now, we have Gen Z and potentially we still have boomers in the same team. Like, that's possible in our workplaces now. And so as a leader, if you're sort of working to everybody's preferences, that's a lot of different streams to be checking, a lot of different messages. And so I think it's fair, and do correct me if you know different. This is your area, not mine. But as a leader, it's okay to set some boundaries in, okay, I get the preferences. This is the way that I'll come to you quickly, or if this is one-on-one in our conversation we're carrying. But as a team, here's where we're going to do our communication, and build that expectation. And I think to a degree, what I'm suggesting is keep with the hooks and things. I love this persuasive technology. It's a new phrase for me this morning, but that's our job to do that. But it's also, we have to sort of bring people into those guardrails and keep them there. Otherwise, this is going to go all over the map really quickly.
Yeah, I think you made a critical point there, is have that discussion, right?
Yeah.
Set those boundaries. We have a plethora of choice. If you're like me, I have 7 email addresses alone. So, this is the email, or this is the preferred style of communication for this team. Let's all agree that this is what we're going to be doing, and this is how we're going to communicate. But oftentimes those discussions don't happen, right?
It's so true.
Yeah, and it's to your point. I think we've touched on a few really good things here around, set the expectations, find out what your team. We're obviously talking internal, and we're talking with folks that you're familiar with and colleagues and working with on a daily basis. If you're starting a new conversation with somebody that you've never spoken to before, there's going to be a level of formality that you perhaps go through. And Tamara, I really like what you said earlier around, as the conversation progresses, it probably gets a little less formal. You drop the good morning, you drop the hello, or maybe it turns into yo. Right? How you doing? That type of stuff. But having those conversations as a team to set expectations. There's a great question in here in the chat around, if their preference is for text message, can you text them saying, please read my email? Sure you can, right? I don't think there's any reason why you can't. But I think what a leader would need to be able to set with their team is, listen, Jimmy, Susie, Bobby, I understand you prefer text. The expectation and what this team does is important team messages are going to go out via this method. Thus,
Yeah.
I expect you to pay attention to those.
Yeah, and not only that, you know, in some instances, when you're communicating with business, you have to have a record of conversation too. So,
Yeah.
you know, choosing the method of communication for certain conversations is going to be important in terms of recording those conversations and keeping those archived on file so that you can refer back to them in the future. So be aware of that. Have those conversations, and if your emails are not getting read, my recommendation to you is not to blame the other person all the time. Have you done the ask? Is this the best way of communicating with you? Or have you actually crafted a message that people want to read, right? So that adds value to their life, that they don't dread, right? When your name comes up on their inbox, does the palm hit the forehead and the big sigh and, oh, I can't deal with this right now. I know it's going to be 2 pages filled with text. I don't have the energy. I don't have the time. So we put it off. They're not going to get read.
So how
You
do
know,
we, sorry, how do we work that pre-header space? Like there's a note from Dan earlier in the chat, and it talks about, you know, do we start with the I hope you're well, and that depends on the conversation. Most times not. I've heard that it's a really good idea to put in that actually what you're asking or what you're looking for and then back it up. Or are we still looking for that hook and it's a question because we need to get into their world? Like there's some sort of
yeah. So that pre-header space for me is wasted if you're throwing in an I hope this finds you well, right?
Okay.
Or I hope you got out.
Yeah.
That's
I
wasted
often,
pre-header space. Put the point of the message in there.
yeah, I was going to say, if I get an email that says, I hope this email finds you well, I reply with, I didn't know this email was looking for me.
Yes. Yeah, it's antiquated, it's old-fashioned. I get where it came from, right? To start building rapport and to ease into the message. It comes from the days of like building your case and then funneling down to a conclusion. Now we're flipping that model on its head. Let's start with the conclusion, build our case, and then end with some rapport building message. I hope you have a great day, have a wonderful weekend with the family. That's where you add that human touch, but put that at the end, right? I'm not suggesting that we don't build rapport that way. I'm suggesting the location of where that shows up on the page is really important. Right?
Yeah.
Pay attention to that. So we hook our reader with, you know, the subject line and the pre-header space, that the shiny, bite-size, snappy lure, essentially. They'll come in and take a bite. Make sure that when they take a bite, they're getting nutrients, right? So that there's actually some value that you're adding, and then finish off with that warm fuzzy, right? Or that opportunity to add a little fun, personality, conversation at the end.
Yeah.
Courtney had a question in here, and I think it speaks to a bigger point. But you know, is it still a best practice to focus on calls to action, right? And so, what I'm going to suggest here, and Tamara, you know, it's my hypothesis. You can either validate or poke holes in it. That if you're sending a message out and you're asking for something specific, a response, or this, or that, it would make sense to specifically call out, I would like you to do this by this time. And if that's not possible, please let me know.
Yes. Who needs to do what by when? Be
Right.
specific in your asks.
And
it's like we have to play triage all the time. So we need to know exactly when it needs to happen. No more as soon as possible. No more at your earliest conveniences. If there's a call to action in there, make it clear, make it stand out, maybe hyperlink it, maybe surround it by white space or bold it. But it needs to be absolutely pop off the page clear.
Exactly. And
because we scan for those.
Yeah, we do. And I think that's the other really key point too, is that if you send an email out that doesn't have a call to action, don't expect a response.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Like there's nothing I hate more than an email that says, thanks for your email.
Oh, right.
Right.
300 billion of those a day are getting sent around. Let's not add to the clutter.
Exactly. I have been known to send an email that says, thanks for your feedback, if I've gotten unsolicited feedback without any sort of request for anything. So but
Everybody
that's an
loves that
entirely
answer.
different conversation. You touched on something earlier that I want to drill into just a little bit before we start to wrap up. You mentioned 7 letters, Chat GPT.
Oh yeah.
Just your
I did.
thoughts
I did.
on how does this, right? This
Yeah,
is a bit of a
ChatGPT.
game changer.
It absolutely is a game changer, and ChatGPT 4.0 was recently released. I think 5 may be on the horizon. And I want to just clarify too, as I listened to Sam Altman speak, ChatGPT 4.0 is not 4.0. It's not a version 4.0. The O, lowercase o, in 4.0 stands for omni. Think about that for a second.
Hmm.
Omnipresent, omniscient, omniferous,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it is all knowing. That's what it's suggesting. Do I use ChatGPT 4.0? Absolutely, I do. And if you're not using it, jump on. It's fantastic search engine, right? It is learning rapidly. I have seen massive improvements in progression since it first launched in 2023 to a few months later now, where we're at 4.0. It's multimodal. It's one in the field of many AI programs that you can possibly use. Is it the be all end all? Absolutely not. One of the words of the year last year was hallucinate. And the reason that one of the words of the year in our English language dictionaries was hallucinate was because language learning models do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They take information from us, they learn from that, and then they create content based on it. But sometimes they get it wrong. So do not hang your hat on it.
No.
There are definitely risks with using ChatGPT. Use it as a search engine, get some ideas, and then add your own personality and your own tone and your language to it. People are very savvy when it comes to your message. Yes, I also use AI tool to help writing.
Yeah, it's interesting. The number of tools that are out there. I find my writing style when I'm just going from draft can be quite rambling. And I have loved ChatGPT for trying to make me a bit more concise and a bit more brief. But to your point, it is very anodyne, and just you need to find a way to put your personality back into it, right? It's just, it can be very, very plain, for lack of a better
Yeah.
phrase, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I even find it wordy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's too.
So, I can take that and then use it, like you say, to start the conversation, to do a little bit of research, to use it as a search engine. But please be aware that it sounds like a robot is writing, and it can sometimes make things up.
Absolutely. Speaking of making things up, you made up 3 great slides for us to close off and share with our audience here at the end. And I think it's time to shift to that. Thank you. It's been a great conversation. We've worked through a couple technology glitches, but we managed to keep communication flowing. So over to you to wrap us up with your
Fantastic.
one big idea.
All
Go ahead.
right. So Jenny's just going to pop up my screens here. So we're going to finish off today's conversation with one big idea. And my big idea for today is to pay attention to the attention economy. So in an attention economy, remember that attention is a scarce resource, and you must compete to capture and retain it. Thinking about short attention spans, people do not necessarily have short attention spans. So they're just very savvy at filtering out content that they're not interested in. So you must capture and retain interest by being short and snappy, adding some visual appeal. Remember that look interesting to keep our eyes on the page. You may want to incorporate infographics or visuals into your messages
Mhm.
and other visual elements just to enhance or retain your reader's attention. So remember, your eyes are capital. So a lot of people are competing for them. You can still choose what you put your attention on. So that's my one big idea, focus on the attention economy. All right, and the next one is 2 strategies. So how can we then compete in this attention economy? How can we write differently, knowing what we now know about persuasive technology? And I want to suggest using this hook, look, and took strategy when you are crafting your messages. And I say crafting intentionally because that's exactly what you're doing. You're producing a product, a consumer product for a customer. You're analyzing their needs. What do they need? And then crafting your message for purpose. What is it that's going to capture their interest? So, right, using the hook, look, and think about it this way. The hook is that lure, the shiny object, the tasty morsel that's going to get your readers to come in and choose to take a bite. The look then has to be visually appealing. It has to be scannable. It has to be easy to read. It has to add value and have a clear call to action. Who needs to do what and by when, be specific. And then finally, wrap up your messages with the takeaway, the took, that final lasting impression that you want to leave. And this is where you can, again, add your personality, make it conversational, add those pleasantries that we're looking for to build relationship and build rapport in our writing. And if you need to have that lasting impression be the one thing you want your reader to remember, you might want to pop it again or reiterate it in that final sentence. So hook, look, and took. And my second strategy is to be aware of personality and authenticity. So we did mention ChatGPT 4.0. Don't write like a robot. You want to write using a conversational tone. You want to pay attention to your reader, their generation, their style, their format, their tone, and you want to respond to who they are. It's interesting. I've seen a shift in the style of content lately, and it's more organic and it looks handcrafted. I've noticed even LinkedIn Reels are using templates that look like a sheet of paper with handwritten notes on it. Why? Because people are sick of the polished and contrived messages. They want authenticity and personality and organic messages. So I'm encouraging you to do the same. Let's respond to that. It doesn't need to be necessarily perfect and polished all the time. You want to remember that we're living, breathing human beings communicating with living, breathing human beings. So that's my second strategy for writing in the age of TikTok. All right, and I want to finish with 3 questions. So the 3 questions are to start paying attention to your messages. Which messages in your inbox catch your attention and keep it? Analyze that. Why is that? What is it about that you like? And then, can I copy that? Can I emulate that? There's something special about it. What is it? And then on the flip side of that, of course, which messages do you dread or avoid? Are there names that pop up or subject lines that make your eyes start to twitch? Honestly, what is it about those ones that you are dreading or avoiding? And then learn from that. Why is that? What is it that you need to do differently in order to not be that person, not be the name on somebody's inbox that gets avoided? Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. And then my final and compelling question to you is, are you writing boring and slow messages? Are you writing boring and slow messages? Because if you are, I can guarantee we're not reading them, right? And if your messages are not getting responded to, you hear crickets, don't blame the reader all the time. Take a look back at what you need to do to change in order to compete in the attention economy.
Very cool.
Fantastic. Well, we certainly can't blame the readers or the participants today, but we might be able to blame Shaw or Rogers for a couple of things. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That's okay. Tamara, thank you so much for joining us. Jenny and I will be back in a couple of weeks to continue the conversation that we had another prior guest, John Partington, and to speak about inclusive leadership. Have a great weekend wherever you are. Cheer hard for Edmonton tonight and Sunday, because it'll be over by Monday. If we do. And as always, Jenny, appreciate you. Tamara, thank you so much for joining us. And
Yes, my
take
pleasure
care.
always to see everybody. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.